Well, the idea came because I suppose my previous life, as it were, as a clinical psychologist, I knew an awful lot about memory. And I know that memory isn't actually what happened. It's something that you create out of snippets of information that you have in your head. And I was interested in trying to paint the way that memories decompose, as it were, over time, and that things are never quite perfect, a bit out of focus, a bit out of perspective, broken, bits that are blank. So that's where my idea came from. This is what this group of paintings is about. I started kind of here, having thought about this for a long time. Somehow you've got to get to the stage where the thoughts in your head get down on paper. And so I started with drawing some ideas of houses that seemed to be unsure of themselves, seemed to be slipping away or recreating themselves or constructing themselves differently. And this is what this group of pencil drawings are about on the wall, which is, I suppose, in a way that I started. That doesn't mean to say that I actually copy these. It's just a way of getting the ideas out of my head onto a piece of paper. They're not necessarily a particular dwelling, a house where I have lived. They're more a kind of conceptual idea in my head about what a house is. So they've kind of got roofs and windows and doors, and you can tell they're houses, but they are not literal. They're not realistic. Some of the ideas that grew in my head as I was beginning to sketch things out was that I realized that I had a lot of very emotional memories about particularly houses where I'd lived as a child. You know, I can remember feeling a bit scared of the dark going up the stairs, as I think all children do. And some of these memories of emotions actually started coming back to me as I was working on more the conceptual idea. There are different components, I suppose, that come into what eventually I finish up with as a finished painting. There is the distorted conception that memory creates. There's, I hope, some emotional feeling which is in the painting. And there's a kind of movement of places and windows and kind of the feelings that I have. I'm not sure that I've got 3 there, but it doesn't matter. That's what I feel is in the painting when it gets finished. This is the first one that I actually did after I'd sort of worked on the sketches for a bit. It's a long process, but and things very often change as you're going along. But finishing, as it's finished up, I hope that you can see the aspects of a house. There's a kind of bit of roof here. There's a door down there with a step. There's a window here, which is these are quite dark because somehow emotionally they were not particularly important to this memory. What was important to this memory, and I think brings in my feeling as I'm talking about it now, the feeling of losing it, losing the memory of this sort of composite house that I'm thinking about. And that's these 2 sections down here, which fade away. They're quite textured, but I hope that they fade away into what you might think of as a sort of mist of time, because time does affect all these things. The fact that this section of the house is actually falling away from another section which actually has within it the door and the window. here you've got wispy things of slight just memories of things which you can't quite grasp, but disappearing into the past again. As a psychologist, a memory came into my work hugely, and I know that things that people remember are disassociated or separated from other bits of the same memory with gaps in between, and you can see here how there's this feeling of nothingness separating two parts of the painting. I hope the bits of it seem to be much more emotional, because that's all part of what memory does. We all know about thinking about past memories that sometimes can actually make you cry. I hope that isn't quite so serious as in this one, but they are disappearing and emotional, and also there's a mystery about them. Memory has a huge amount of mystery. And what's all this about, you might say? Well, it's about that mystery of things that you think you remember, you think you don't remember, and there they are. This painting is one that I think of as my breakthrough painting in a way. It's got a number of rather peculiar things in it, and for a long time I didn't quite know why they were there. Paintings have a way of developing things, and almost as if it's alive and they want to come into the picture. And I found that happened with this one, and I had no idea at all. It was a friend of mine who was looking at it one day, and he said, "You've painted your father's mill." And I realised then what all these things were about, or at least some of them were about. My father had an old cotton mill in which he used to make other things, and I used to go and play there on Saturday mornings, and it was dark, spooky, long, rather peculiar, empty staircases of concrete stairs. And here you can see, I hope you can see, we've got the stairs going up, and this rather strange light bulb which occurs in quite a number of my recent paintings, until I remembered that, of course, I used to creep up these staircases, and the last one had a very low ceiling, and it was really quite spooky, and the only thing which was brought one back to safety was the fact that there were bleak light bulbs at any shades or what have you, which you could switch on going up these stairs, and I can see them now. Once I'd painted the picture, I remembered where I'd seen it, but it kind of came by itself. And indeed, you can then start to see that there are other tall mill-like structures occurring and cottages which were attached to them. And the more I look at it, the more I realise that that's where these memories had come from. That's in a way why it turned out to be rather dark and spooky, because that was the emotion that I was feeling at the time. Once I'd realised that a lot of this painting was about my father's mill and being there on Saturday mornings playing in this rather spooky place, I thought that some of the other, or at least this image here, was very much tied up with my father, and gradually the whole thing began to represent him. And we had a pianola, one of those things that has rolls of music that it plays itself, you could pretend. And Father used to play this, often with the French windows open into the garden, as if he were a concert pianist. And I remember all through my childhood, always summer of course, because that's, you know, the good days of thing, that he would be playing this music. And as I was a dancer at the time, this music was a lot of it was Chopin and things that I used to dance to anyway. And this memory of him doing this is very, very strong. And that's why you've got the keyboard in the picture. That this one started off very differently. It had a lot of things in it which I wasn't pleased with. So one day in desperation, I got a pot of white paint and painted a lot of it out, which is a thing that I do quite often. And most of this white over here is covering up things that I painted first, which if you like, is another metaphor for memory, because things are actually hidden behind that. But basically what I'm left with is Father's Mill again. And if you see, there's two sections of stairs, one here and these rather fading away, mysterious ones. And they are these stairs that I used to play with. Mill chimneys, Lancashire mills, if you know any of Lewes' paintings, there's a kind of echo of his work with these tall chimneys. Don't do people particularly. And down in this corner here, I've got this archway, which is another thing that occurs quite often in my paintings, which are the entry into this rather deconstructed, sectionized building, which takes you up into this one, across here with the window, over to the door, down the steps, around in a circle, up the steps again, and out through another archway here. So that's a journey through a building with some of this metaphors of the experiences that I had when I was in there. And we've got the funny little bit that you saw in the earlier painting of the bits that's disintegrating between two sections of the building. This one is cleaner, and I guess that the emotion that it produces in me is of much more assured of this building. I don't feel this one is quite so scary as the other one. I think it's the second one that I painted about the particular building, and I feel I've in a way come to terms with it more. I've got it out, I've thought about it, I've felt the emotions, and now this one is much more settled. This is a collage where I have taken pieces of old paintings that haven't worked particularly well, and in a way a bit like I feel about the dreams, that I've sort of cut out sections of them which, if you like, are the memory bits, the ones that still in my head. The pieces that I cut out I think are directed in a way from my memories and my feelings about it, and then I assemble those meaningful bits, and when I'm happy with the balance of the whole thing, then they get attached to the background. I think you could see perhaps that the external dimensions of this one actually represent a house. We've got the chimney up here. It's a rather square 1930s house, but there is an outline of a house. But if you then look more closely at each section of it, I hope that certainly in some places you will see that they actually represent a small section of a house. You see the front door here, of this house here. Here's another door of that house which is partly covered up, but it stands, as it were, by itself as houses which together make up yet another building. I'm not sure about this one, but I see the corner of a house in that section there as there. So some of them are more clear-cut, other ones are more, you can make up what you like of them really, but together they represent a memory of collected bits which together another of my memories. And then there's some writing on the top which actually says everything that I've been talking about this morning. It says, old houses stimulate memories. Memories are fragmented and fractured, somewhere between dreams and reality. And in a way, that's exactly what I'm trying to paint. Right, now here's another one, which is collage. And most of the things that are used in this painting are actually from the house in which I live. And here's a bit of this material that was used on the extension that we had built, and you will see that down here there's an L-shaped piece of the same. It's actually faded. That was the colour in which it was when I found it, thrown away with the builders. And we've got another little bit of it there, and these are pieces of wood which I have actually painted, but they were part of the construction of the extension to the house. And there's you'll notice here a piece of canvas, which actually we didn't use in the house, but it's an extra. And some of you may have noticed that there's a lot of lines in my paintings, and some of the others have actually got pieces of wire used as part of the picture. I can't tell you why those are there, but they are somehow very meaningful to me, and they pop up, they insist upon being drawn. And here there's a good example, because I'm not quite sure what they're doing, but without it there's something missing. So that's again a collage, different, to do with a house, but if you like, totally fragmented. There's no outside outline or anything that makes you think, oh yes, it's a house. They are bits of house stuck, collaged onto a canvas. I think I know where this house is. One of my 3 sons used to live in a very tiny, almost doll's house in Brighton, which was his kind of first house, the independent house. And I mean, I just would, it made me, he was the last one to leave home, and he went and he bought this house, and I was so proud that he did. And therefore it has kind of happy memories, but it didn't suit him really, and he knocked the whole of the inside of it out and reconstructed it, which I was a bit sort of kind of concerned. I thought he'd done it wrong, but you know, who is a mother to tell her son that he's done it wrong? And somehow this house, this white house, it was a white house, reminds me, I'm not sure I knew all that before I painted it, but as I went on with it and added pieces collaged onto it, I realised that, and indeed now I look at it, having not seen it for a short time, I feel that this section here represents the fact that he took the whole of the inside of it out and kind of started again. Also, this is one where the wire, where the lines that I always feel have got to be there are actually pieces of wire running up the side of the house and down. Okay, we've got a window here. I'm not quite sure why it's there, whether you're looking in or somebody's looking out, but I do know that if you cover it up, the picture loses its heart. It kind of feels dead. It's the window that draws you into the painting, and you want to know more what's going on inside, I think. The ultimate, I think, this one. There's hardly anything which represents in any reality way the house. It has the skeleton in wire, other materials on it, as if that's really only the bones of the memory that are left. I find it quite scary, I think, of any of the paintings that I've done. Emotionally, this one represents to me the rather scary emotion of actually losing your memory. It's nearly all gone. And the older you get, of course, the more reality creeps up on you. And that's, I think, why I find this one, it is disintegrating, it's gone. It's lost its detail, it's lost its objects. It is just the bare bones of a memory. And it's all kind of being blown away in the wind, and here it's disintegrating. And I just find this really quite scary, but I'm glad I've done it. And it's gone, but it's not gone. It's still there. Here's another one that's memory is being blown away. It's rather similar to one that I see as only thing that's left is the bones of the memory. And we've got that idea here as well. Again, with the wire, the construction, the outline, the building materials, just as you start a house, but is very often the last thing that exists anyway. But if you look carefully, and this is a little voice of hope, as it were, there is a tiny little house down in the corner. So it's not gone totally, this one. It's still there, it's getting further away, but it's just about still existing in my mind. We've got life still going on. We've got a piece of twig here taken from the garden. Bits of canvas, which I think is somehow canvas, I know it's something you paint on, but also canvas is a material that has been around for a long time and maybe represents ancient, prehistoric living places. And the wire is keeping the whole thing up, keeping it going. But the whole atmosphere, the whole emotion here is of dusty mistiness.